Okay, so welcome to my holiday kitchen. So today we are going to go over a little bit of like a baking gift guide. So I love to gift sourdough, so I'm going to show you how I add some fun different ingredients into my sourdough bread to gift it at Christmas time, and then how I wrap it up to give it to people. And then also we're going to be making some mini cinnamon wreaths. So I've shared this cinnamon recipe lots of times on Instagram, but I'll share it here as well. We're gonna mix up 2 batches and then we're gonna split them into 3. And so we're gonna make a star, a giant cinnamon roll, and a cinnamon wreath, and I'm gonna show you how I package those up to gift to people as well. So gifting food for me is such a great thing to do around the holidays. It saves lots of money, and I mean, who doesn't appreciate getting sourdough and fun things to eat at Christmas? So we have our cinnamon wreath, so we have all the dry ingredients mixed up in this bowl. And then we're gonna cut the butter in. So I actually like to grate my butter. It's not super cold, but I find it just easier to incorporate it into recipes because you can kind of evenly distribute it a little bit better. So we're gonna scrape that in, and we're gonna mix that up. And I just use my dough hook and my hands to do that. So once you have that all mixed in, we're gonna take our sourdough discard. So here's the thing with this recipe, because it is a leavened recipe, so essentially if you're gonna make cinnamon rolls without sourdough, you're gonna need yeast in order to rise the dough. So we are using sourdough. You can use sourdough discard from your fridge, but you're gonna wanna make sure it's a little bit on the thicker side. So what I've done is I've made a leaven sort of like I would make bread. So this would be a leaven for bread. You can see it's nice and active and bubbly. I like this consistency for the cinnamon wreath only because it just sort of kickstarts the dough. It rises it a little bit faster. But if you have lots of time and you can let it sit for a little longer, you can use a thicker discard in your dough and just leave it out on the counter, sometimes overnight. Overnight works great. It'll rise nice and big. You don't have to leave it that long, but I find sometimes in the winter when it's really cold outside, it needs a little bit of extra time in order to kind of get that rise and that development in the gluten so that you have this really fluffy dough and it's not super gummy inside when you bake it in the oven. So I have here just, I made it last night, so it's sort of like feeding your starter. I just did up an extra starter in a different jar, and it's nice and thick. So because I don't have all day to let this sit and rise, so I'm only probably gonna let it rise for maybe a few hours, and then I'm gonna come back and start shaping it up. So then we're gonna take our milk and pour that in on top, and then I like to take the dough hook and just sort of mix that discard or leaven in with it and start in the middle, and then you're just gonna kind of stir around the outsides. If you're using a mixer, that's great too. You can just let the mixer do the work. So because we're trying to develop gluten in this sense, you can't really over mix it when you're using a mixer. You want to mix it until it's all combined, and then you want to almost keep mixing it because we are going to pour this out onto our countertop and we're going to knead it for a little bit because we really want to get that gluten started. So this is one that I made probably half an hour ago, and it hasn't risen. This is not a dough that's going to rise really puffy like you would with yeast. When you make cinnamon rolls with yeast, oftentimes it will fill the bowl. That is not going to be the case with this. There's a lot of butter in it, and then sourdough doesn't rise the same way that yeast does. So don't worry about that. This is still probably the best cinnamon roll you're ever going to have in your entire life. Mark my words. But it is not a dough that is going to get really giant and fluffy, and that's okay. So we're going to stir this up, and then we're going to pour it out onto the counter and get kneading. So let's pour out whatever wasn't mixed in with the dough. Then I just take little bits. We're gonna knead it to incorporate all the flour. So this actually makes such a beautiful dough, and what I find is the thicker your leaven or your discard, the less flour it's gonna need to take on during the knead. And that's not good or bad, it just is. The thicker your discard, the less flour you're gonna need. That goes for any discard recipe. So we're just going to knead really quickly. Again, if you're using a mixer, you can just kind of keep mixing it, although I do find even with a mixer, you're gonna probably have to take it out at some point to knead it. And you really want to get in there with this dough because the more you can kind of see how it's like quite lumpy. So I'm going to use some actual flour instead of just this flour that was in the bowl. It can be a little lumpy on the top, so you really want to knead it enough that it gets really soft and pliable before you put it back in your bowl. And we're just going to cover it up and let it rise. Now, a trick is make sure when you cover it up, you're not using like a dish towel. You want to use something that's going to trap, not trap the air in, but trap the moisture in. With sourdough, that's really important, or you get that dry crust on top, and then it's not really going to be as nice to work with at the end. So this is just a beeswax wrap that I put over top of my bowl. And I really like these because it doesn't dry out the top of the dough. So I have them in a whole bunch of different sizes, and I just plop them over, or this is my sourdough. You can put a plate over it. Just making sure you're not using a towel. And that goes across the board for pretty much any sourdough that you're going to use. So I've been kneading this for several minutes, and you can see now you don't need as much flour on the counter. We have a bare space, it's not sticking, and it's really nice and smooth. It's not going to be perfect on the top because of all the butter that's in there, but it is going to get nice and smooth and not sticky. So that's good enough. We're going to stick that back in the bowl, cover it up, and come back to it in a few hours to shape into our rolls and our wreaths. So while that is rising over there, we're going to do some bread. So I'm going to show you how to add inclusions into your bread. I find this really fun to do at Christmas time. We often will do it with Lindor chocolates. I don't have our Lindors yet, so I'm going to show you how I do it. With these are like a mint chocolate chip, and I'm going to do a score and milk chocolate chip one as well. So we have bread, we have dough ready. I'm going to show you how we shape it. The difference between shaping it normally and shaping it when putting inclusions is we're not going to do a pre-shape first. So normally I would do a pre-shape, let it sit, and then come back to it and add the inclusions in. We're actually going to just add the inclusions right into the dough. We're going to shape it up, and then we're going to put it into our banneton baskets and let it proof, and then bake it later on. So that's the only difference, but I'm going to show you exactly how I divide my dough and shape it when adding inclusions into the dough. So this makes 2 loaves. It's finished its bulk ferment. It's been in the fridge all night, and now we're gonna shape it. So I like to weigh mine because I'm terrible at eyeballing shaping, and I like them to be even. So we're just gonna divide it in half as best we can and weigh them to make sure that they are equal, and they're not. That's good enough. Okay, so I'm going to show you the chocolate one first. We're going to take your dough and we're just going to flip it over and spread it out. It doesn't have to spread out too much because you want to be able to shape it up nicely. And you don't want this top to be too thin, because remember, anything that you put here is going to be what pokes through on the top of your loaf. So you want to kind of keep this relatively thick when you're kind of going through. So we're just going to take our chocolate and sprinkle it liberally around the dough, so making sure it's quite even, but not too much of it. So remember, what we are doing here is we're going to fold this in. So when we fold this in, these are going to come over here. So you can even kind of err on the side of not putting as much on this side. So we're going to fold that side in first. We're going to take this, fold it over, and I'm going to take some more chocolate here. And I'm going to press it in so that it stays even. We're going to fold that over again. And then we're going to put some more chocolate here. Doesn't have to be pretty, but you want to kind of do it as evenly as possible, just so that when it bakes, it's even. And I'm not gonna lie, as this proofs and then when it goes in the oven, you'll inevitably have chocolate that's gonna pool in one area more than the other, and that's just kind of the name of the game. So don't worry too much about that. You're gonna have like a really nice flavor of mint chocolate going through your sourdough, and then we're just gonna roll it in. Try to roll the edges in because the chocolate will kind of like fall out. And because there's so many inclusions in this, I find it tricky to shape. So I like to use my bench knife and just kind of get under and tuck in the edges and pinch up the ends. Okay, I'm gonna put a little flour on the top. You wanna make sure that you have a lot of flour in these types of bannetons. I like these types of bannetons a lot. They're my favorite. They're made out of paper pulp, but they need a lot of flour. Okay, so that looks good to me. We're gonna flip this over and we're gonna put it into the banneton basket. When we do that, you're gonna notice that some of those chocolates are gonna poke out. And I purposely didn't put a ton of chocolate in this. I mostly just want the flavor in each bite and not necessarily, you know, a massive amount of chocolate in the loaf, because ultimately that will affect how it bakes as well. So that looks really good to me. We're gonna set that aside. And we're gonna do our score loaf. So I have here, I don't have a lot left. Daniel really likes score cookies, so we buy score bits. I couldn't get them when I was in Utah, so I don't know if everyone can, but they are Hershey score chip-its. They're like little toffee bits. These taste great in bread because they kind of like melt into the bread. It's delicious. So we're gonna, and you can really be quite liberal with these because they're so tiny and they'll melt through the bread. So it's kind of like anything goes. So you could just do score if you wanted. I'm gonna add a little bit of milk chocolate. So the other ones that I was using was a dark chocolate. This is a milk chocolate. So let's just dump a little bit out on the counter there. And a little more of this. Again, I mean, it's obviously not the most healthy sourdough in the whole world, but it is a really fun thing to do at Christmas time. And I only ever make my Lindor bread at Christmas because it's just a really fun thing to do. And it's a fun thing to gift to people. Okay, so you can also do really healthy inclusions as well if you want to do like cranberries and some nuts or, you know, something like that. We're gonna fold that in and do the same thing again. These you almost have to like really press into the dough because otherwise they kind of roll off. We'll put a few chocolates there. And fold that over. The problem with doing things like score or even like sugar, like cinnamon and sugar, is it won't stick. You can see it's like lifting up. So you almost want to come in here and pinch the dough parts together so that it like stays shut. Oops, dumped that everywhere. Okay. Last little bit of chocolate. And again, you can do as much or as little as you want. I'm just gonna take this off the. And you can roll it up. And again, I like to kind of pull the edges in as I'm rolling. And you can add bits of ingredients in chunks that look like they don't really have a lot. Down in these corners always seem to be empty. Okay, that's a little more full than the other one, but not too bad. We're gonna pinch in those edges just to kind of keep those ingredients in there as best we can. You don't need much with the bench knife. And then a little bit of flour on the top. I like to use a brown rice flour because, you know, then you're not adding more gluten into your dough, but regular flour works just fine if that's all you have. Okay, so we're gonna put this in here and then try your hardest to pinch in whatever ingredients. If there's some really like left out like that, I'll often just pick them off. Same with if I'm going to go score my loaf. If there's a bunch popping out, I'll often pick them off before putting them in the oven. The reason that I do that is because anything that's sticking out the top, once it goes into the oven, it's just going to burn. Okay, so those are our 2 loaves. We're going to cover those with plastic. I have like just some sleeves to put the bread in, and we're going to leave them to sit. I'm probably going to pop them in the fridge for a couple hours too, because I like to bake from cold, and then we'll come back and we'll bake them and see how they look. Okay, so let's make, we're gonna make a cinnamon wreath, and we're gonna make a giant cinnamon roll. So this is dough, this is the first dough that I made, so it is ready. We're gonna just divide it right down the middle. Because we want them to fit, I'm gonna show you the boxes. We're gonna put our gifts in these little cute little boxes that have the face on it, so you can see through and see what you're getting. And unfortunately, this whole dough makes like a 12-inch cast iron. We're going to be using a 10-inch cast iron, which is even probably still a little bit big for half of it, but it will give us the perfect size to put in our little gift bags there. So we're going to separate this into 2, and we're going to make 1 into our wreath and 1 into our large cinnamon roll, and I will show you how to make both. So this rolls out really nice and easy. With the wreath, I like to kind of make it as much of a square as I possibly can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just it's a little easier when you're rolling it up. I'm gonna put a little bit of flour just underneath there, just to make sure that it's not going to stick to the counter. So you can kind of see, I mean, you may not be able to see that in the video, but you'll be able to see when you make your own, like the ferment bubbles that are in this, and you'll kind of get a feel for whether or not it's done. And because I used a really nice active leaven for this, it only took about 2 hours to rise. And I mean, you saw, it didn't rise, it didn't puff right up. That's not really what you're looking for with this. You're just looking for a little bit of an expansion in the dough, and then it's gonna be nice and soft and stretchable and feel really good. Okay. So I'm gonna leave that probably like this. I don't want it to get too thin. We'll just kind of stretch it to be as even as we can get it. So then we're going to take our filling. This is just our sugar and our butter and our cinnamon. And I like to kind of blend it all together first. This is enough for the whole batch, so you're only going to use half of it on this one. You can do as much or as little cinnamon as you want in it. I may add a little bit more after the fact. And you can do this filling with all sugar, or you can do brown sugar. So I didn't have brown sugar, so mine is just sugar, butter, and cinnamon. But I do really like it with the brown sugar. It gives it more of like a caramely flavor when it cooks. So I definitely suggest using it if you do have it. So I'm just gonna dash a little bit of extra cinnamon over it. We'll blend that through. Okay, and then we're just gonna take it from this end and we're gonna roll it up. Again, this is a really beautiful dough to work with. It should roll really nicely. And you want to make sure that it stays even, or I like to make sure that it stays even on the edges. those over. Okay. So at this point, I like to take out our parchment paper and place this on it. So then we're gonna take a nice sharp knife, and I'm only gonna, because we're doing half of the recipe, so in our cookbook, we're gonna make a braid, but this is quite thin because again, we're using half the dough. So I'm just gonna go straight down the center with this. It looks equally as beautiful no matter what you do. Switch knives. That one wasn't quite cutting it. This one's nice and sharp. Okay, once you have it split, I like to face it up so all the layers are exposed. And then you're just going to braid it. So keep that top together just to start. And then you're just going to start switching them back and forth. And again, it's important to make sure that the layers remain facing up, because that's what you're going to see when it goes in the oven and bakes. You want to see those beautiful layers. Otherwise, you're just getting like a flat dough or a flat bread. Okay, and we're just going to pull it as many times as it'll go around and just kind of pinch the ends. And then I like to take a knife and slice out the top. It's not going to be perfect, but that worked pretty well. And you're going to twist the top, pinch it together, and then we're going to make it into our wreath. I have also tucked the ends in of this and put it in a loaf pan or baked it as a baguette in a baguette strip, and that's beautiful too, but that's obviously not going to fit into our box, so we are not going to do that today. But if you're kind of looking for something for the holidays, different ideas, you can try that. So what I'm trying to aim for here is I really want those layers to be exposed as much as possible as we come around. And then we're just gonna pinch the ends together there. And that's gonna be the bottom of your wreath. And what you can do with that is you can put a little bow there. I've done that once it is cooked in the oven. So we're going to come in here, I'm gonna put it in this actually. You can just slide it off the counter right into the pan. The reason that I use the parchment paper is when this comes out and it's all baked, this is going to be really, imperative to getting it into the box. You're going to want to be able to lift it out of here and place it in the box with the parchment paper. Otherwise, it'll ruin the box if you don't have the parchment paper. So we're going to leave that. We're going to set that aside while the oven preheats, and then do our large cinnamon roll. But that's what it looks like before it bakes. We're going to stick that in the oven. So this is the second half of the dough, all rolled out, same way we did the first one. We're gonna take our filling spread and just try to make it as even as we possibly can. Another tip for spreading filling is if your dough is having a hard time, or if it's like pulling a lot, this one is starting to a little bit, you can pop it into the fridge right before you roll it out. And don't put it in there so that it's rock hard, but you can put it in there so that it is a little bit stiffer, so that it doesn't pull as much, especially if you find you have butter that is a little bit more cold, so that when you're spreading it, it's a bit trickier. You can easily put the dough into the fridge. I didn't have time to do that today, but it is a trick that I use often when I'm making the wreath, because it's so much easier to braid your wreath, or even form your cinnamon rolls, like even cutting your cinnamon rolls, cutting the dough, all of those things. It's just a lot easier to be able to do that when the dough is a little bit colder. So this one's really fun. We're going to prepare our cast iron with our parchment paper. And we're actually gonna cut this in strips. So we're gonna start. I always struggle at first trying to get a feel for how thick I want this. So this is too thick. Yeah, this is a bit too thick. So I'm gonna slice that down and just sort of get a feel for how I want that. Okay, you're gonna start by placing that in the center of your cast iron. And then we're going to do the next one as thin as we can, or as narrow as we can. We're gonna roll this up. Actually, sorry, we're not gonna roll it up. We're going to take it, lavender on my fingers. We have lavender above us, so it often falls down. And I'm going to wrap it around. I'm gonna find the edge that it stopped at, and I'm gonna wrap it around the cinnamon roll. Again, making it nice and narrow. It's hard to be narrow with it. It tends to go like that. I'm terrible with that. I'm not overly efficient. Oops, I keep wanting to roll that up. Sometimes easier to take it out of the pan with the parchment, so I'm actually gonna probably just do it on the table. Okay, and we're gonna wrap it around again, and don't do it really tight. Try to keep it loose. Okay, let's try to do it even this time. Can we do it? Nope, we can't. Still not. Take it and we'll find that point. More lavender stuck in there. And we're gonna wrap it around. Keep going. So it will kind of get to a point. Just wanna make sure I'll be able to lift that off the table. It will get to a point where it will just reach around. So now the seam is on this side. So what I'm gonna do for this one is I'm gonna slice it. I'm getting better, it's getting more even. So now I'm actually gonna start the seam at the other side, or like anywhere else, because I don't want there to be one big seam that cuts through it on it. So I'm gonna it's gonna cover that up. But now you'll see, like, you have to stretch it a lot further to actually close. So this one probably won't even close at all. So you want to just cover up that seam. Oh, yeah, if you stretch it enough. So these pieces on the outside are going to be obviously more stretched than the inside. And then we'll do the last couple. Just make sure that that seam is up, so then this isn't going to actually stretch all the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one, I'm going to slice the edge off so that it's a little straighter. I'm going to cover up that one seam. I'm going to pinch the edges on here. Okay? And that is going to be our giant cinnamon roll. I'm going to stick this in here. And you could easily make this obviously as a bunch of cinnamon rolls to put in there, but I just think this is so fun. And you can cut it in like little triangles, like a cinnamon roll pie. So we're gonna pop those both into the oven for about 35 minutes at 350. And they're gonna get a glaze on the top once they come out. So where's the other one? So that is those are the recipes, that's that one recipe just divided into half. So you can do 2 batches of this and we can make 4 beautiful things for people, and they're like a nice little family size. The wreath, like the whole recipe, when you make it in like a big wreath, I find can be more of like a party size. So this is like a fun little dessert for people. So how we're gonna do this next part is I had a whole batch of the cinnamon dough, and I divided it in half, and then I divided one section into 3. So this is one section. And then I grabbed, so I divided the other section into 3, and I grabbed one of the 3 pieces. So I have 4 pieces. And then this section here is just sort of like I'm gonna just shape these into just some cinnamon rolls and bake them. But this section, so essentially you're dividing one batch of your cinnamon dough into 6 and taking 4 of the pieces from that. The reason that we're doing that instead of just dividing it into 4 and doing the whole thing is because, again, it'll be too big for the box. So we're just gonna use 4 of the 6 pieces to make a smaller star. And I'm gonna show you how I do that. And then the pieces that are left over here, we're just going to put together, roll it out, and make into some extra cinnamon rolls that we can kind of make a nice little package of if we wanna do that. Okay, so let's make our star. I'm gonna tilt you down and show you how I do that. Okay, so we're gonna roll these into our circles. And you're gonna have, because we wanna have 4 circles that are relatively the same size. And what I like to do, because when you're cutting dough up, it's hard to make it so that you can roll it into an even circle. So what I like to do is just roll it out kind of the best I can. We're gonna set it aside because we have to do all 4. And then I like to just sort of stretch it, sort of like I'm making pizza. And I'll show you how I make them even once we kind of get them all together. So we're gonna stretch it like that into as much of a circle as you possibly can. And then you're gonna set that aside. And we'll roll out all the other ones and do the same thing. So you're gonna roll all 4 pieces into your large circles. Okay, so we're gonna take our pieces one at a time onto the parchment paper. And we're going to spread our filling. Take this part and fit it. So then you just want to stretch the edges out to match the one underneath. Okay. And then doing the same thing. Okay, and then last, this one on here. This one is a little bit bigger than the rest of them. So we're just gonna, what you can do in that sense is you can kind of trim the edges. So I'm actually gonna pull that out and trim it off because I don't want it to be really bulky. I'm gonna just trim that off there and I'm gonna trim it off there. Okay, a little bit of this. And then we'll put our top on. What I'm gonna do is I want this to be like a perfect circle. That's what's gonna make the star kind of look the prettiest. We're gonna tuck in those sides. We're just gonna come around and form it into a perfect circle. Not perfect, but as close as you possibly can. Okay, and then we're gonna take our bench knife, or actually you can use a regular knife too. And basically you're gonna find the center of your dough, and you're gonna cut it into 4. So when I do this as a large star, I often will put something like this in the center. I think that's gonna be too big right now, but I think I might have done it a bit too close for this, but you can kind of just gauge, just make sure that you keep a circle of some sort in the middle for when you go to twist your dough. Okay, and then you're gonna cut those in half. and then you're gonna cut them in half again. So then you're gonna come in, and if it doesn't cut through, then you just go through and cut it all the way through, and you're gonna twist it. So 1, 2, and around, and pinch those ends. And 1, 2, and around. And the ends are obviously gonna be like a lot thicker. And you're gonna go all the way around and do the same thing for all of them. Okay. So again, it's a little lopsided. I'm gonna slide that into my cast iron, just like that. You can brush the top with a little bit of milk and sprinkle it with a little more sugar as well. So I may brush this with some milk on the top. It just kind of makes it a nice shiny dough. You don't have to do that, especially if you're gonna put a glaze on it. It's, you know, you can always brush it with egg as well too. I'm not gonna put a glaze on this, so we are gonna brush it with something, and I'm gonna dust it with some powdered sugar once it comes out of the oven. So I'm just gonna go, again, you can use egg, I'm just using cream. You can just go around and brush. There. It's gonna go into the same cast iron and bake in the oven. So here are the first two out of the oven. We're gonna do a glaze for these ones, and we're gonna do something different for the other ones. But I just mixed up some powdered sugar and some cream, and we're just gonna drizzle it over. I like to try to start thin because I want it to be as even as possible, but you can go as thick as you'd like, and you can go this way or you can go around it. It's kind of whatever you're feeling, and really there's no wrong way with this. It looks beautiful no matter what. And then with this one, I like to start in the center and kind of twirl out. So start, and I like to kind of spiral it outward as best I can. But you can do this anyway as well. You can go over it like this. There's really no wrong way of doing this. But I like to do it as a swirl. I feel like it looks really, really cool. Okay, and so we're just gonna leave those. You wanna make sure that they're really fully cooled when you go and do the icing. Otherwise it will sort of like melt into, you know, into the wreath or into the cinnamon roll, and then you won't see it. So make sure that they're fully cooled. Take your time with that. If you have to put it in the fridge for a minute, and then drizzle on top. I am gonna share a white chocolate glaze as well that I like to do with these. It tastes delicious, so. Okay, so those are those two. We're gonna just let them sit until the other ones come out of the oven, and then I'll show you how I package those up. And I will also, we're gonna get the bread in the oven as well. So these are the final two out of the oven. I just kind of did a quick knot with the other one, and we're just going to sprinkle them with some powdered sugar instead of a glaze. So again, you wanna make sure that they're nice and cooled, at least on the top when you do this. And this could be like a star or snowflake or whatever you want it to be. And then you're gonna let them cool completely before we stick them into their packaging. But that's what they look like. So we have our glazed And we have our snowflake or star and our knot. So just out of 2 batches of the cinnamon dough, you can make 4 really beautiful gifts that are very different to go in a package. So I will show you how I box them up. Once they're cooled, we'll box them into these. These are just cake boxes I found on Amazon. I believe they are like a 10-inch box or maybe a 9-inch, but these will fit perfectly in there. All right, so the bread is ready to bake. So we're gonna stick these into the oven. So I have these proof in the fridge for a while, and basically when they come out, you should be able to poke your finger into it and it shouldn't rise back up. Kind of like memory foam, like you should be able to poke it in and it'll stay there, and then you know that it's ready to bake. So we're gonna pop these into the oven. I'm gonna show you how I score them, and we're gonna put them on our bread mats and bake them. And then once they cool, I'll show you how I wrap them up. All right, we're just gonna place our mats on top like this. Flip it over and it should fall right out. If you have to bang it a bit, you can do that. Okay, 1. And basically once they're proofed, they should hold their shape. That's the trick. So once you pop them out, you should be able to score. We're not gonna do intricate designs on these today because they have inclusions and I don't want all the inclusions to kind of like pop out of them. But I'm just gonna kind of brush. We'll do like a little design on them. But they should hold their shape enough that you should be able to do a scoring pattern on them without them deflating or pooling out onto your bread mat. And that's another way, that indication that you know that they are fully proofed. So I like to take my brush here and just kind of clean off the area. And the reason that I do that is because otherwise all that flour, if it goes into the oven, it can burn, and we don't really want the bottoms of them to burn. So I like to brush off the edges. And it will go through the holes in the mat, so we'll brush that off. Perfect. Okay. So let's just do something really simple with these. I'm gonna take a little more flour off that. There was a lot of flour in the banneton. I'm gonna do just like an evergreen tree or something. So we just start at the top. You can do more, as many as you want, really. And these nice shallow scores are easy because when you have inclusions in your bread, they usually won't interfere with them, so they won't poke out. So you can do like a little tree forest there. Okay, and then we're gonna do our big expansion score. So you always do your big expansion score going down the sides. So we're just gonna take that all the way down, and I can already feel that I was like running into some chocolate there. So what I'll probably do is just pop that right out. And the reason for that is once that opens up, that chocolate will just burn. And some of them might poke out anyway, but so there's one. And then let's just do the same thing to this one. Do some little trees. And the trick with the flour is, you know, when you have lots of flour like this on it, it'll help the design stand out once it's baked, which is always fun when you're gifting bread. Okay. That one didn't have as much chocolate in it, so I'm not hitting any chocolate on that one. I think this was the score one. Okay, so we'll get those into the oven and bake them. So we're gonna put all of these in our boxes to gift. I'll show you what I do. So again, these are just cake boxes off Amazon. You could get bigger ones and do, you know, larger gifts, but I think these are a nice size. So I like to keep the parchment paper on it. It just keeps the box cleaner. And we're just going to stick them in one by one like that. And what I like to do is take the edges of the parchment. You can actually even cut the parchment, but I kind of like how it looks because it looks a little bit like tissue paper. So I like to fold those under. Just like that. Okay, there's one. So again, you want to make sure that these are fully cooled because otherwise it will create condensation, obviously, on the window there. So I'm just going to tuck all this under. Put that into the bag. Or the box, sorry. And you can write something on the box, you know, kind of whatever you'd like. So this is what they're all look like when they're done. And then the wreath. It's like a really nice stack of gifts that you can give to people. So you have 4 really nice boxes full of desserts just from 2 batches of the cinnamon dough. And now we're gonna wrap our sourdough. So these are out of the oven. These are still a little bit warm, but I'm gonna show you how they wrap. This one didn't rise as much as I wanted to. It stayed a little dense. I'm not sure why. This is the caramel one. You can see the caramel kind of pooled down in here, the toffee. This will be really yummy when we cut into it, but I'll show you how I wrap these up to gift. So let's wrap up this sourdough. I find oval loaves easier to wrap this way, but you can do it as a round loaf as well. You're going to bring your corners or your edges together and then just fold them over just like you would a present. And then you're going to tuck one edge in. Okay, and then tuck the other edge in. And so I'm just going to fold this up just like that so that I can push this into my belly to get under the rest. So we're going to fold those under like this. And then we're going to scrunch them up. So roll it in to the sides. And this is going to kind of hold it in place. Okay, turn it around. Okay, so you can leave it like that. I'm going to do both. This one smells like mint chocolate. Okay, so rolling it down. You can make the parchment paper as long as you want, depending on what you need. Okay, and then I just have some butcher twine. You can do any type of twine, or you can do like a really pretty ribbon. So I just wrap it around like a present. Oops. This also holds the ends on nicely too. You can tie it in a bow or a knot. I'm going to tie it in a knot. And then we'll do the other one. So then with the edges, or sorry, with the extras on there, you can use, I have two different tags that I like to use. So this one is just a snowman tag. I just slide it underneath. And tie it on, and then you can just clip off the extras. Like that. This one, if you want to just do like keep it like a nice brown tag, you can take the edge of or the end of this and just slide it in, and you can tie it on with your extra twine that you have there, and then just trim off the extras. So either one. We have our big stack of beautiful boxes with our sweets, and then our sourdough bread. And those are some gift ideas for you this Christmas.